Let me tell you about something sitting in almost every spice cabinet in the world, something so plain, so unglamorous, that most people walk right past it in the grocery store without a second glance. It's not a supplement. It's not a powder shipped from overseas with a fancy label and a celebrity endorsement. It's a tiny mustard-colored seed called fenugreek. And for thousands of years, long before anyone had ever heard the word insulin, people in India, in the Middle East, and across parts of Africa were using this humble little seed as both food and medicine. And here's the thing that really gets me. Modern research is starting to catch up to what grandmothers in those kitchens already knew. Because when you soak a spoonful of these seeds in water overnight, something interesting happens by morning, and it has to do with how your body handles sugar. Now, before I go further, let's talk about why blood sugar even matters so much, because I think a lot of people hear blood sugar and their eyes glaze over like it's only something diabetics need to worry about. Now, before I go further, let's talk about why blood sugar even matters so much, because I think a lot of people hear blood sugar and their eyes glaze over like it's only something diabetics need to worry about.
That is not true. Every single one of us, whether you've been told you're pre-diabetic, whether you're perfectly healthy, or whether you're somewhere in between, is dealing with blood sugar spikes and crashes every single day, often without realizing it. That afternoon slump where you can barely keep your eyes open at your desk, that jittery, irritable feeling before lunch when you feel like you could bite someone's head off, that's often your blood sugar swinging up and down like a roller coaster. And over years, those swings can wear on your body in ways you don't feel until later. So when I talk about a food that may help smooth out that roller coaster, I'm not just talking to people managing diabetes, I'm talking to anyone who wants steadier energy, fewer cravings, and a body that isn't constantly lurching from sugar high to sugar crash. Now let's get back to fenugreek, because the overnight part of this story is not a gimmick. It's actually rooted in how these seeds work. Fenugreek seeds are packed with a special type of soluble fiber called galactaminin. Say that 3 times fast. But here's what matters. This fiber doesn't just sit there. When it hits water, it swells up, turns gel, and that gel-like texture is key, because when you eventually eat it, that same gel forms in your digestive tract and slows down how quickly sugar and carbohydrates are absorbed into your bloodstream. Think of it like this. Imagine your digestive system as a highway and glucose is a fleet of cars all trying to merge onto that highway at once during rush hour. Normally, without anything slowing things down, all those cars merge in at once and you get that traffic jam we call a blood sugar spike. But that fenugreek gel acts almost like a traffic officer spacing out the cars, letting them merge one at a time. So instead of a jam, you get a smooth, steady flow. That's the theory. And it's not just theory. There have been actual clinical studies, some published in peer-reviewed nutrition and diabetes journals, where researchers gave participants fenugreek seed extract or soaked seeds and measured their blood sugar response afterward. And a number of these studies found modest but real improvements in fasting blood sugar and in how the body responded to a meal. Now I want to be honest with you, because I'm not here to oversell this to you like some late night infomercial. This is not a magic bullet. It will not reverse diabetes overnight. It will not replace medication if you're on medication. And please do not stop any prescribed treatment because of a video you watched on YouTube. What it may do, based on the evidence we have, is give your body a gentler ride when it comes to processing sugar, especially when it's part of an overall pattern of eating that already includes vegetables, protein, and whole foods rather than ultra-processed snacks and sugary drinks. So how does this actually work in practice in your own kitchen? Tonight, it's almost embarrassingly simple. You take about a teaspoon of whole fenugreek seeds, not the ground powder, the whole seeds, and you drop them into a small glass of water before you go to bed. That's it. No blending, no cooking, no complicated ritual. You let them sit overnight, and while you're sleeping, those little seeds are doing their slow, quiet work, swelling up, softening, releasing some of that fiber and those beneficial plant compounds into the water. In the morning, some people drink the water on an empty stomach and then eat the softened seeds afterward, almost like a small bitter snack. And I'll be straight with you, fenugreek has a distinctly bitter, slightly maple-like flavor that not everybody loves right away. Some people find it grows on them. Others mix the soaked seeds into a smoothie or chew them alongside a bit of honey to cut the bitterness, or even add them to their morning oatmeal. There's no single correct way to do it as long as you're consistent, because like most things involving your body's metabolism, this isn't a one-time trick. It's the accumulation of small, steady habits that adds up to a meaningful difference over weeks and months. And that, to me, is the real story here, not some miracle overnight transformation, but the quiet power of something small done consistently, working in the background while you sleep, while you go about your day, while you live your life. So many of us are searching for the next big breakthrough, the next expensive supplement, the next fad, when sometimes what our body actually needs has been sitting in a spice jar in the pantry the whole time, waiting for us to give it a chance. Now, once you've got that first habit down, the soaking, the sipping, the steady rhythm of it, I want to take you a little deeper because there's more to this story than just one seed sitting in a glass of water. You see, Fenugreek doesn't work in isolation. Nothing in your body really does. Your blood sugar isn't controlled by one single switch that flips on and off. It's more like an orchestra with dozens of instruments all playing together. And Fenugreek is just one instrument, albeit a surprisingly powerful one, joining that orchestra. So let's talk about what else is happening inside those little seeds, because the fiber story, as impressive as it is, isn't even the whole picture. Fenugreek seeds also contain a compound called 4-hydroxysilucine. And yes, I know these scientific names sound like something out of a chemistry exam, but stay with me because this one's fascinating. Some researchers believe this particular compound may help support the body's own insulin activity, essentially encouraging the pancreas to respond a little more efficiently when blood sugar rises after a meal. Now, I want to be really careful here because this is where a lot of health content online gets sloppy and starts throwing around words like boosts insulin production, as if it's a proven, guaranteed effect for every single person who eats a spoonful of seeds. It's not that simple, and I'm not going to pretend it is. What we actually have is a body of early and mid-stage research, some in animals, some in small human trials, suggesting a possible supportive role. That's meaningfully different from a cure, and I think being honest about that distinction is what separates real information from wishful thinking dressed up as science. But here's what makes this story genuinely interesting to me, and why I think it deserves more attention than it gets. It's not just about the seeds sitting quietly working on their own. It's about what happens when you start paying attention, really paying attention to the rhythm of your own body. Because here's something most people don't realize: the way your blood sugar behaves in the morning often sets the tone for your entire day. There's actually a term for this in some nutrition circles, sometimes called the second meal effect, where what you eat or don't eat first thing in the morning can influence how your body responds to food later at lunch and even at dinner. So when someone starts their day with that fenugreek water, followed by a breakfast that isn't loaded with refined sugar and white flour, they're essentially setting up a domino effect, a calmer morning response leading into a calmer afternoon response, rather than a spike crash pattern that leaves you reaching for something sugary by 3 p.m. because your body is essentially begging for quick energy after crashing from an earlier spike. This is why I always tell people, don't think of fenugreek water as a standalone fix. Think of it as the first domino. It's the thing that can make everything that comes after it just a little bit easier. Now let's talk about something people rarely bring up in these videos, and that's fenugreek's relationship with inflammation, because blood sugar and inflammation are far more connected than most people realize. Chronic low-grade inflammation in the body has been linked in research to insulin resistance. That's the condition where your cells essentially stop listening, as well to insulin's signal to absorb glucose from the bloodstream, forcing your pancreas to work overtime, pumping out more and more insulin just to get the same job done over time. This cycle can wear things down. Fenugreek seeds contain antioxidant compounds including flavonoids and saponins, which some research suggests may help calm that inflammatory response in the body. Again, may help, early evidence, not a guarantee. But it does paint a picture of why this seed has stuck around in traditional practice for literally thousands of years across completely different cultures who had no way of communicating with each other, no shared scientific journals, no internet. And yet somehow independently people kept arriving at the same conclusion. This seed does something worth paying attention to. There's something almost humbling about that, isn't there? That before we had glucose meters, before we had lab tests and peer review, people were watching their own bodies closely enough to notice patterns, closely enough to pass this knowledge down through generations, mother to daughter, grandmother to grandson, without a single research grant funding any of it. Now, I also want to address something practical, because I know some of you watching this are thinking, okay, this all sounds nice, but is it safe for me specifically? And that's exactly the right question to be asking, because fenugreek isn't automatically right for everyone. If you're pregnant, you should be cautious with fenugreek in medicinal amounts, since it's been traditionally linked to uterine stimulation in some contexts. If you're on blood thinning medication, you'll want to talk to your doctor first, since fenugreek may have mild blood thinning properties of its own. And if you're already taking medication to manage your blood sugar, this is not something to add in casually without a conversation with whoever is managing your care, simply because combining multiple things that lower blood sugar can, in some cases, push things down further than intended. None of this means fenugreek is dangerous for most healthy adults in normal culinary or traditional amounts. It isn't. But respecting your own body enough to ask the question, rather than blindly following whatever a video on the internet tells you, that's exactly the kind of thinking that actually protects your long-term health. So let's bring this all together now, because I think by this point you're probably wondering, all right, I get the science, I get the history, but what does this actually look like if I want to try it for myself starting tonight? And I love that question because this is where all of this stops being just an interesting story and starts becoming something real in your life. Here's how I'd suggest approaching it step by step in a way that respects both the tradition behind the seed and the modern reality that you probably have a busy life and don't have time for complicated rituals. Start small. Tonight, before bed, take about a teaspoon of whole fenugreek seeds. You can find these at most grocery stores in the international or spice aisle, or at any Indian or Middle Eastern grocery, usually for just a couple of dollars for a bag that will last you months. Drop that teaspoon into a glass of room temperature water, cover it if you like, and just leave it on your nightstand or your kitchen counter overnight. That's the entire ritual. No apps, no tracking, no complicated protocol. In the morning before you eat anything else, drink the water first. Some people find it easier to add a small squeeze of lemon to cut through the bitterness, and honestly, I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. There's no rule that says traditional remedies can't be made a little more pleasant. Then, if you're up for it, eat the softened seeds themselves, maybe stirred into yogurt or oatmeal, or even just eaten plain if your palate can handle the bitterness. And here's the part I really want you to hear, because it's the part most videos like this skip over entirely in their rush to promise you dramatic results. Give this time. One morning of fenugreek water is not going to transform your health. This isn't a switch you flip. This is a habit you build the same way brushing your teeth twice a day isn't going to fix your dental health in one sitting, but done consistently over months and years, it changes everything about your oral health. Blood sugar regulation works the same way. Give it 2 weeks, then 4 weeks, then 8 weeks, and pay attention. Not obsessively, not anxiously, but with a kind of gentle curiosity to how you feel. Is your afternoon energy a little steadier? Are your cravings for something sweet after lunch a little quieter? Are you sleeping a bit better? Since blood sugar crashes at night can actually disrupt sleep for a lot of people without them ever realizing that's the cause, these are the kinds of subtle shifts that matter more than any dramatic before and after number, because they represent your body actually settling into a steadier rhythm. Now, I also want to leave you with something bigger than just this one seed, because if there's a real lesson buried in this whole story, it's this: so much of what we're taught to believe about health tells us that the solution has to be complicated, expensive, or extreme to actually work. We're bombarded with messages about extreme diets, expensive supplements shipped in flashy packaging, complicated fasting protocols, all promising to be the answer. And sometimes, sure, bigger interventions are exactly what someone needs, especially if they're dealing with a serious diagnosis and working closely with their doctor. But for so many of us, the answer isn't more complexity. It's actually returning to something simpler, something our great-grandparents would have recognized instantly, something that costs a few dollars and requires nothing more than a spoon, a glass, and a little patience overnight. That, to me, is the quiet beauty of a seed like fenugreek. It doesn't need a market budding budget. It doesn't need a celebrity spokesperson. It's just been sitting there in kitchens around the world for thousands of years, working steadily in the background while entire civilizations rose and fell around it. And I think there's something worth sitting with in that thought. That real sustainable health often doesn't come from chasing the newest trend, but from rediscovering what's already been proven to work generation after generation, long before we had lab coats and clinical trials to explain why. So if you take one thing away from everything we've talked about today, let it be this: you don't need to overhaul your entire life tonight to start moving toward better blood sugar balance. You just need one small, consistent habit done with patience, paired with the kind of eating pattern that already supports your body rather than working against it. Plenty of vegetables, adequate protein, minimizing the ultra-processed sugary stuff that floods your bloodstream all at once. Fenugreek can be one piece of that puzzle, a gentle, time-tested piece, but it works best alongside everything else, not as a replacement for it. And if you're dealing with diagnosed diabetes or prediabetes, please use this as a conversation starter with your doctor, not a substitute for their guidance. Bring it up, ask questions, let your healthcare provider help you figure out if and how something like this fits into your specific situation, because your body, your history, your medications, they're unique to you, and no video on the internet, including this one, can account for all of that. Take care of yourself, be patient with your body, and remember that sometimes the most powerful changes really do start with something as small and unassuming as a spoonful of seeds in a glass of water, quietly doing their work while you sleep,